Miguel and Rabika Haro seemed like the perfect couple raising their baby boy, Emanuel, but behind the closed doors of their quiet suburban home, a dark secret was festering, one that would end in betrayal, murder, and the shocking exposure of the truth no one ever saw coming. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, lined with trimmed lawns and neatly painted houses, the Haro family seemed to embody the picture of normalcy. Miguel Haro was known as a hardworking man who left early each morning and returned late in the evening, while his wife Rabika often strolled through the streets with their baby boy, Emanuel, resting peacefully in his stroller. To anyone looking in from the outside, they were the kind of family that inspired admiration. Neighbors would wave at them as they passed, noting how young and radiant Rabika looked with her son, and how proud Miguel seemed of the small family he had built. There was no reason to suspect that their lives were anything other than ordinary, yet beneath the surface of this seemingly calm household, there were small cracks that only the closest observers might have noticed. Miguel and Rabika were polite but never truly warm with neighbors, while other young parents in the area gathered for barbecues or exchanged parenting advice at the park. The Haros kept to themselves. Conversations were brief, and visits were rarely welcomed. Their home, though tidy, always had the curtains drawn, as if shielding their lives from curious eyes. Emmanuel's presence was cherished by those who caught glimpses of him, but whispers circulated about how little anyone actually saw the baby. Some residents couldn't recall hearing him cry or laugh the way children usually did. Still, the image of the Haros remained untarnished, at least on the surface. People chose to accept the distance as privacy, nothing more. Behind the walls of their modest home, however, a different reality was unfolding, one that would soon shatter the illusion of perfection forever. The truth, hidden in silence, waited patiently to be uncovered, and when it finally emerged, it would horrify the entire community. One morning, the peaceful rhythm of the neighborhood was disrupted when the Haro home appeared strangely lifeless. The usual sight of Rabika pushing Emmanuel's stroller down the street was gone, and Miguel's car, which normally left before sunrise, was absent from the driveway. Curtains were drawn tighter than ever, and the house seemed to radiate an unnatural silence. At first, neighbors assumed the family had gone on a short trip, perhaps visiting relatives. But as the days stretched into a week, unease began to ripple through the community. The mailbox overflowed with letters, the lawn went unmowed, and there was no sign of little Emmanuel's cheerful presence. When Miguel finally reappeared, he looked disheveled and exhausted, as if carrying the weight of something unspoken. He gave a vague explanation, telling those who asked that Rabika had taken Emanuel to see her family in another town. His words were simple, but his demeanor raised suspicions. He avoided eye contact, deflected questions, and offered no details about when they might return. Some neighbors tried to reassure themselves that perhaps Rabika simply wanted a break or needed time away, but others could not shake the unsettling feeling that something was deeply wrong. As more time passed, doubts grew stronger. Rabika's family had not been seen visiting, and no calls came from her to explain her absence. Friends who tried to reach her were met with unanswered messages. It was as though she and Emmanuel had vanished without a trace. Miguel, meanwhile, continued to come and go at odd hours, sometimes late at night, sometimes disappearing for entire days. His erratic movements and nervous energy only deepened the mystery. Behind the quiet facade of the Haro household, a chilling secret was beginning to take shape, though no one yet knew its full horror. The growing unease finally reached a breaking point when Rabika's relatives decided to alert the authorities. They had not heard from her in weeks, and the silence was unlike her. She was known to call her mother daily, often sharing small updates about Emmanuel or asking for advice. For her to vanish without explanation was unthinkable. When police arrived to question Miguel, he appeared calm on the surface, but the inconsistencies in his story immediately stood out. He repeated that Rabika had gone to visit her family, yet when detectives checked, no such visit had taken place. The relatives she supposedly stayed with denied seeing her, and there were no records of her traveling anywhere. Miguel attempted to strengthen his story by showing text messages he claimed were from Rabika. In them, she explained she needed space and would be gone for a while, but investigators noted something odd about the tone. The words lacked the warmth and familiar phrasing that her family recognized. Instead, they seemed cold, generic, and detached, as if someone else had written them. Further examination revealed the messages were sent from an old device linked to Miguel himself, a discovery that quickly raised red flags. Phone records provided another troubling clue. The timeline Miguel gave did not align with the data. Calls he claimed to have made at specific times never appeared on the logs. The more detectives cross-checked his account, the more it unraveled. Miguel grew increasingly defensive when pressed for answers, often changing small details or brushing off questions. To the investigators, it became clear that this was no ordinary missing persons case. The disappearance of Rabika and Emanuel now carried the chilling possibility of a staged cover-up, and Miguel was rapidly emerging as the central suspect. When investigators conducted a thorough search of the Haro residence, they approached each room with meticulous care, hoping to uncover something that could explain the sudden disappearance of Rabika and baby Emanuel. At first glance, the home looked ordinary. The kitchen was clean, the living room orderly, and Emanuel's nursery appeared untouched, with neatly folded baby clothes and toys arranged carefully. Yet detectives sensed that the neatness itself was unnatural, almost as though someone had staged the rooms to appear perfect. Their instincts proved correct when, in the master bedroom, they discovered an item that shifted the entire investigation: a worn notebook hidden beneath the mattress. The journal belonged to Rabika, and the entries were raw, emotional, and deeply unsettling. She had documented months of growing fear and despair. Page after page, she described Miguel's controlling behavior, his short temper, and the way he isolated her from friends and relatives. Financial troubles weighed heavily on him, and she feared the stress was fueling his anger. But the most alarming entries were those written in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Rabika confided her suspicion that Miguel was planning something terrible, admitting that she felt unsafe and trapped. She wrote about her anxiety for Emanuel's well-being, describing sleepless nights spent wondering if her child was in danger under his father's roof. The final entries chilled investigators to the core. They hinted that Rabika had discovered secrets Miguel was hiding, secrets that could destroy the image of a stable family he worked so hard to present. Her words read like a warning, as if she knew she would not get the chance to speak them aloud. The journal transformed the case from a mystery into a grim likelihood. Miguel had both the motive and the opportunity to harm his wife and child, and the evidence was beginning to point directly to him. As detectives dug deeper into Miguel's movements, they began piecing together a timeline that painted a far darker picture than his carefully rehearsed statements. Surveillance footage from a nearby hardware store showed him making late-night purchases, rolls of duct tape, industrial, strength cleaning products, heavy, duty trash bags, and a large plastic tarp. Though he tried to pass these off as supplies for household repairs, investigators knew the combination was suspicious. The receipts confirmed the dates, days before Rabika and Emanuel were last seen. Financial records revealed even more troubling details. Miguel had withdrawn large sums of cash from his bank account in small increments, just enough to avoid drawing immediate attention. The money trail led police to a storage facility located on the outskirts of town. Rented under a false name, the unit became the key to unlocking Miguel's secrets. When authorities pried open the door, they were met with a chilling sight. Inside were scattered items that clearly belonged to Rabika and Emanuel: a baby stroller, tiny clothes still stained with spots of what appeared to be blood, and jewelry that her family later confirmed she always wore. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigative team. Forensic teams were brought in immediately to examine the items. Tests confirmed traces of blood, though whose it was remained to be determined. The careful concealment of the unit and the effort Miguel had put into creating a false identity underscored premeditation rather than impulse. Detectives could no longer treat this as a disappearance. It was now almost certain they were dealing with foul play. Every new piece of evidence chipped away at the facade Miguel had worked so hard to maintain, and the horrifying reality of what might have happened to Rabika and Emanuel was beginning to take shape with undeniable clarity. As investigators pursued every lead, a shocking revelation came to light, one that reframed the entire case. During the forensic analysis, detectives obtained DNA samples from items found in the storage unit. When compared to Miguel's DNA, the results revealed an unexpected truth. Baby Emanuel was not biologically his son. The discovery stunned the investigative team and gave new context to Miguel's growing resentment. For months, Miguel had lived under the weight of a secret he never publicly acknowledged, raising a child who carried another man's bloodline. Digging into Rabika's past, detectives uncovered records of a relationship she had before marrying Miguel. It was with a man who had since moved out of state, someone Rabika never completely severed ties with. Emails and hidden messages retrieved from her phone suggested she had continued to communicate with this man, confiding in him about her struggles at home. For Miguel, the truth was devastating, a direct blow to both his pride and his identity as a father. The journal entries previously discovered now carried an even heavier meaning, as Rabika had hinted at wanting to leave Miguel once she gathered the strength. Investigators began to piece together a chilling motive. Miguel's jealousy, humiliation, and fear of public exposure could have been the driving force behind his actions. The picture of the Haros as a perfect family was completely shattered. Behind the smiles and stroller walks, Miguel had been battling a storm of betrayal and rage. The discovery of Emanuel's true paternity was not just a private wound. It was the spark that likely ignited his spiral into violence. Detectives realized they weren't just investigating a crime of passion, but the fallout of a long, hidden family secret that had finally erupted with deadly consequences. With mounting evidence closing in, detectives intensified their focus on Miguel. Weeks of surveillance revealed his increasingly erratic behavior, restless pacing in his yard at night, sudden unexplained drives across town, and long hours spent alone in his car. When officers finally moved in to arrest him, Miguel put up little resistance, though his expression remained cold and unreadable. Brought into custody, he initially clung to his story that Rabika had left willingly, insisting he had no part in her disappearance. But the evidence against him was overwhelming, and investigators knew it was only a matter of time before the facade cracked. Interrogators presented him with the journal, the staged text messages, the damning footage from the hardware store, and the blood-stained items recovered from the storage unit. Each piece of proof tightened the walls around him. Miguel grew agitated, shifting in his chair, changing details of his story, and lashing out with anger. At last, confronted with the DNA evidence that exposed Emanuel's true parentage, his composure fractured. He admitted that he had discovered the betrayal months earlier and had confronted Rabika on the night she vanished. What he revealed was chilling. In a fit of rage, fueled by humiliation and jealousy, he killed her during a heated argument. Emanuel, only an infant, began to cry, and Miguel confessed that in his fury, he silenced the child permanently. The coldness of the confession left even seasoned investigators stunned. This was not a crime of sudden impulse, but one steeped in festering resentment. By the end of his statement, Miguel seemed drained, as though the weight of his secrets had finally broken him. The horrifying truth was now laid bare, and there was no longer any doubt about the fate of Rabika and baby Emanuel. The trial of Miguel Haro drew enormous attention, both locally and nationally, as details of the horrifying case were revealed in court. The prosecution laid out the evidence piece by piece: the staged text messages, the hidden journal, the surveillance footage, and the blood-stained items from the storage unit. Each detail painted a picture of calculated violence driven by jealousy and rage. The revelation that baby Emanuel was not Miguel's biological son became the centerpiece of the motive, showing how humiliation and betrayal had festered until it turned deadly. Jurors sat in stunned silence as the full scope of the crime came to light. Rabika's family filled the courtroom every day, clutching photos of her and Emanuel. Their grief was immeasurable, but their determination to see justice served never wavered. When Miguel finally took the stand, he appeared hollow, his once defiant demeanor replaced with a cold detachment. He showed little remorse, speaking of his actions as if they were inevitable consequences of his wife's betrayal. His words only deepened the outrage of those listening. The jury deliberated for less than a day before returning with a unanimous verdict, guilty on 2 counts of murder. The judge sentenced Miguel to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never walk free again. For Rabika's family, the verdict brought a measure of closure, though it could never erase the pain of losing both daughter and grandson in such a cruel way. The case left the community shaken, a chilling reminder of how darkness can hide behind even the most ordinary front doors. Baby Emanuel's short life and Rabika's tragic end became a haunting story told for years afterward, a warning of the devastating consequences of secrets, lies, and unchecked rage.